Hello guys, if you are e4 players and you enjoy playing fun and aggressive gambits in general, then you might enjoy this video as well, because here today we are going to be looking at e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, and if your opponent goes for pawn to d6, the Paris defense, I'll be showing you a fun gambit that you can play against this. But what I find pretty interesting is that the ideas that I'm about to show you are potentially playable against all sorts of other opening moves by black. So I'll be making probably a little bit of a series on this, and I call this the DC Gambit system. Let me explain why. So for example, in this position that we are going to be looking at today, you can continue with the d4, sacrificing the d-pawn, and after they capture, just immediately sacrifice the c-pawn. Hence the DC Gambit, also making your opponent's DC during the game in rage because of the traps that you are going to get them in. Just kidding. So after they capture the c-pawn, here I recommend you to just simply get castled. So here we are down 2 pawns, but we are up in development, and this is the whole point of our gambit, to get developed very, very quickly and start showing the aces up our sleeves. Well, I'm not sure I said that right. Alright, well here black has a number of things that they can do. For example, they can develop this, they can develop this, they can capture this. So let's just start by looking at the most common played line, like usual. So the most played move here is developing knight to f6. And here we are going to play a trademark move, queen to b3. So creating a threat against this f7 pawn, and black needs to deal with this. And actually the most played move is queen to e7, which is a little bit of a mistake, which will turn out later as a great mistake. And that is because we can capture on c3 with our knight, and here the only move for black to survive is to play queen to d7. This move doesn't ever get played. It gets played in less than 0.9% of the games actually. And if they play something else, well, they will end up in a trouble. So for example, in this line, the most common way to continue for black is to go for knight to a5. With this move, they are trying to get rid of the light square bishop actually. But we are not going to allow it. We are going to here continue with queen to a4 check, and now they have nothing else to do but to block this check with the knight. Otherwise, well, the knight would get captured. So they move back the knight to c6, and we are going to continue with knight to g5, creating once again the threat against the f7 pawn. And how can black deal with this now? Well, very logically looking, bishop to e6, right? But after bishop to e6, we are going to capture the bishop. Now pawn needs to recapture, and here we are going to play this ridiculous looking but the best move, bishop to a6. What a move! Well, what are we achieving with this? Well, we are threatening to capture here and fork the rook and the knight. So of course black once again needs to deal with this, but it's not really so simple. They cannot capture the bishop, because here we would just, collect this knight with the check and later collect this rook, and we will be winning. Well, some guys try to play rook to b8, holding on to the pawn, but doesn't work. We can just capture the pawn. Now we are threatening to capture this knight, which is also pinned. And there's like nothing to do. They can capture the bishop, but we are still going to just capture the knight with the check and collect the rook on the next turn. So some other guys tried getting long castled, also looking like could be a playable move, but we can simply just capture the knight on c6. And now the pawn is pinned and it cannot capture the queen. So they will of course just grab the bishop, and although the material is well, they are still up a pawn, but they are losing because of how exposed their king is now. Here the engine is suggesting to continue with bishop to e3, but I believe just a simple queen captures on a6 with the check is fine. They need to run their king to d7 and you can bring your knight to b5, threatening this pawn which they actually cannot protect. And after you capture it, now you are threatening to fork the queen and the rook. You also created yourself a passed pawn on the queen side and life is just great for white. So this is kind of a mainline trap that you can get because it's in the most common line. Let's go back. So this was after they went for this knight to a5, trying to get rid of your light square bishop. Well, what if they play something else? As I explained, the only thing is to play queen to d7, which doesn't get played. And then some popular options are, for example, pawn to g6, where you can reply with bishop to g5, and now the position is like +7 or even more. And if they go for example, bishop to e6, trying to counterattack your light square bishop, well, you can just capture it, and after they capture, you are capturing on b7, forking the rook and the knight, and this is like almost +10 for white. Yeah, so that's why they are usually messing this up in the line of them playing queen to e7. The better option for black would be, after we played queen to b3, aligning with the bishop on f7, a better move for black is to play queen to d7. In this case we are still going to be capturing the pawn on c3, but the sad thing about this variation is that we are going to be losing our light square bishop if they play knight to a5. Now we have no option but to move our queen, so we go queen to b4 and they can capture the light square bishop. But don't worry, we are still going to be having some tricks up our sleeves. And let me just point out one thing. If, for example, here your opponent goes for bishop to e7 trying to get castled quickly, this is once again a huge mistake because they have blocked their queen of guarding this pawn, so we would be able to capture on f7 with a check and be in a winning position right there. But yeah, let's have a look at this. Knight to a5, queen to b4, they capture, we capture, and in this position they are very safe to play bishop to e7, which is the most played move. And I recommend you to continue with a tricky pawn to e5. They have to capture this pawn, of course, because otherwise it hits the knight. And we are going to go for some more forcing moves. For example, here we go rook to d1, hitting the queen. And actually the most played move here is queen to e6, which hangs the c pawn, so we are going to capture that. And in this position, like everybody seems to be panicking and just getting castled, and this is now once again losing for black because of the amazing knight to g5. We are hitting the queen, and the queen actually is the only piece guarding this bishop, and it cannot stay in touch with this bishop, and that's why after the queen moves somewhere, notice how it cannot go along this file. After it moves somewhere, we'll be able to just simply pick up this bishop. So this is not really playable for black, but they have the alternative option, and that is to go queen to c6 here, which doesn't get played very often, but if they do this, you can swap the queens, give them a doubled pawns on the c file, and just capture the pawn on e5. So we are going to be winning back some material. Now also this c pawn is hanging, so bishop to b7 is played, and we are going to go bishop to g5. They get castled and we can capture the knight, because after they recapture with the bishop we can go knight to d7, hitting the rook and hitting the bishop. So after the rook moves, we give them another doubled pawns, and in this position, although they are up one pawn, the position is actually better for white because of how bad their pawn structure is. Alright, let's go back all the way and let's talk about some other variations. So far we've been only looking at the knight to f6 as their move 6 after they accepted the gambit and we got castled. So let's have a look at the second most played move, and that is bishop to g4, pinning our knight. Well, here we are going to immediately unpin with queen to b3, setting up our battery against f7, and you would be surprised how many people just captures this knight on f3, thinking that, haha, we are so smart, we are going to get him a doubled pawns, and just walks into a checkmate in 2 moves like this. So that's how you can finish the game quickly if your opponent isn't careful. But of course, after queen to b3, there is actually only one correct move here for black, and that is to play queen to d7 in order to protect the f7 pawn. Queen to e7 doesn't work because of queen captures on b7, and going back with the bishop to e6 isn't very good because of this big threat, and we end up in this position, also winning for white. But let's stick with the best move, and that is queen to d7. There is an engine-supported line, a complicated one that starts with knight to g5, where white is able to maintain a little bit of an advantage. But actually, for the purpose of keeping this opening simple, I'm going to propose a different move, which is a simple idea, and that is to capture on f7 with the bishop. So we are sacrificing the bishop, and after the queen captures, we are going to play queen captures on b7. And now this is like a draw according to the engine, because black has sort of a forced the repetition in this line, but they need to find the correct move, and that is king to d7 here, which is just ridiculous, and it doesn't get played. Lucky for us, the top 3 most played moves are blunders, namely rook to b8, then rook to d8 and bishop captures on f3. But just to show you, if they play king to d7, it just hangs a rook, right? So they are not very likely to play this, but we can capture the rook, they can capture on f3, and after we recapture, they can get their queen in, and no matter what white does, black is going to be having this repetition, which is a draw. But yeah, I don't think you are going to be seeing this. King to d7, funny move. Of course, their rook is hanging, so any human is going to be saving their rook. So rook to b8 is the most played one, but basically anywhere the rook moves, the knight is falling with the check, and usually they even come back with their bishop, which is not very correct, to try to harass our queen. But in this case, just some more pawns are going to be falling. Also, this is going to be falling, and well, yeah, white is going to be having a winning position thanks to the lead in the development and having their king safe. Let's go back and let's now see some other line. So this was with the bishop to g4. Well, what if your opponent just simply captures this pawn on b2? Well, of course, we are first going to recapture with our bishop. And once again, lucky for us, the most played move here is a blunder, and it is knight to f6, a very nice developing move, which doesn't work because of knight to g5. And we are hitting the f7 pawn for the 10th time in this video. And black has no good way to deal with this. Well, I mean, they are trying bishop to e6, but we are going to simply just capture this bishop, and after they recapture, we can capture with our bishop. And here queen to e7 is like the most played move, but we can simply just slide our bishop back to d5. It's funny, but the most played move here is knight captures on d5, which is a big blunder, because we are going to recapture with our pawn, and now they cannot allow our rook to come on the e-file, so they would need to play knight to e5, but simply f4, and the knight is a goner. And if they play more correctly and don't capture the bishop, but rather get castled, we are first of all going to capture the knight on c6, because we want to damage their pawn structure in front of their king. And here we can continue with knight to d2. Giving some support to this pawn, which actually they are already hitting twice, but it is a poison pawn, because if they capture now queen to g4 check, and we are picking this knight on the next turn. And if they play the correct move, which is pawn to d5, here there are always ideas of bringing your queen to a4, trying to go for the king like this, your rook like this, your bishop like this. your other rook like this, your knight like something like this, and just win. Alright guys, I think this is it for this gambit. I hope you liked it. Have some fun, take care, and bye.